Welcome to another creepy story. Tonight, we're diving into a strange and unsettling tale that will make you question what's real. But be warned, once you start, there's no going back. If you enjoy stories like this, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new scary story. Also, if you have your own real creepy story, share it in the comments, and we might just turn it into a video with your name featured. Let's get started. The scalpel is supposed to be an instrument of control. That's what I've always believed. For more than 2 decades as a surgeon, I built my life on the certainty that when the knife touches skin, I'm the one guiding fate. Every cut is planned, every stitch is deliberate, nothing happens by chance. But medicine doesn't prepare you for the things that refuse to fit into textbooks. And even now, years later, there's one case that still wakes me in the middle of the night. Soaked in sweat, my heart pounding against a memory I wish I could erase. It was a Friday night at Memorial General, a level 1 trauma center where chaos walked through the doors like it owned the place. We'd just closed on a gunshot victim when the trauma pager screamed again. The ER called up a 34-year-old male, found unresponsive at home. No forced entry, no sign of trauma. Paramedics said his wife found him collapsed on the living room floor. She swore he had been perfectly healthy an hour earlier. We were told to expect a straightforward resuscitative thoracotomy. Nothing about the case sounded unusual, but I remember the moment I laid eyes on him, something twisted in my gut. His skin wasn't pale like a patient in shock. It wasn't cyanotic like a man starved of oxygen. It was gray, slate gray, the color of ash, as if he'd already crossed some invisible line between living and gone. The team moved like clockwork. Nurses clipped leads. The anaesthesiologist secured his airway. My resident prepared the chest tray. But as I gloved up, I couldn't shake the feeling that the room itself had grown heavy. The monitors hummed steadily, but the sound seemed dampened, like we were all working underwater. I told myself it was fatigue. Trauma surgeons live on the edge of exhaustion, and strange thoughts creep in when your body begs for sleep. Still, when I touched his chest to mark my incision, I swear I felt a tremor ripple beneath his skin. Not muscle, not reflex, a shudder, as if something inside recoiled from me. Vitals are unstable but holding. The anesthesiologist announced, "We need to move." His voice cut sharp through the haze, grounding me. I lifted the scalpel, pressing it against the sternum. That's when I heard it, a sound too soft to be spoken, too deliberate to be imagined, a whisper that brushed the edge of my mask. "Don't." My hand froze mid-cut. I looked at the anesthesiologist, at the scrub nurse, at my resident. None of them flinched. No one else had heard it. The monitors ticked steadily on, indifferent to the terror seizing my chest. For a surgeon, hesitation is deadly. Seconds bleed into minutes, and minutes cost lives. I forced my hand steady, ignoring the tremor in my wrist. I pressed the blade down and opened him. The incision was smooth, precise. But what waited beneath was not anatomy. Not the anatomy I'd memorized, dissected, repaired 1,000 times. Instead of muscle and bone, there was a space, a hollow that didn't belong. The retractors spread the tissue too easily, like the body had been waiting to open itself. I expected sternum. I expected ribs. But there was nothing, just a shifting darkness that seemed to drink in the surgical lights. The resident leaned closer, his voice unsteady. "Doctor, where's his chest wall?" I wanted to snap at him, tell him to focus, tell him he was imagining it. But I couldn't, because he was right. The sternum was gone. The ribs weren't there. What I was looking at wasn't human. It wasn't even empty. It was moving. At first I thought it was the light catching pooled blood, but the longer I looked, the clearer it became. Something was shifting in that hollow space, not organs, not tissue, something formless, rippling, like black smoke trying to take shape. My chest tightened as the whisper came again, louder this time, curling through the sterile air. "Not yet." The scrub nurse jerked her head up, eyes wide. She'd heard it too. The monitor screamed, suddenly heart rate spiking. Pressure plummeting. The anesthesiologist shouted orders, pushing drugs, adjusting oxygen. But I barely heard him, because as the numbers collapsed, the cavity widened. The retractors rattled against the edges of the table, sliding apart on their own. And from that impossible void inside his chest, 2 pale shapes flickered into view. Eyes, open, unblinking, staring straight at me. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the scalpel. My resident gasped, his knuckles white on the retractor handles. The scrub nurse whispered, "It's looking at us." And in that moment, I knew the truth no surgeon ever wants to face. I was in saving a life that night. I was standing on the edge of something I could never explain, something that had chosen to open itself through my hands. The anesthesiologist's voice snapped like a whip, cutting through the static in my ears. He's coding start compressions now. My resident scrambled onto the step stool, pressing both palms down on the man's chest. But the sound that followed wasn't bone-resisting. It wasn't the dull crack of a sternum giving way. Each push sank too deep, like pressing into wet clay. My gut turned to ice. This wasn't CPR. This wasn't even human anymore. Epi, 1 milligram for, I barked, forcing the panic out of my voice. The scrub nurse obeyed, her hands trembling as she passed the syringe. The medication was pushed. Seconds dragged. Nothing changed. The monitors screamed back at us, flatlined and merciless. Again, I ordered, charge the paddles. The defibrillator hummed, its rising tone sharp against the suffocating silence. We pressed them to his chest. Clear. A jolt ran through his body, jerking it violently against the table. For an instant, the room held its breath. Then, impossibly, the heart monitor blipped once, twice and stopped again, but I noticed it. So did my resident. The flicker inside his chest cavity pulsed in perfect rhythm with the shock. It's feeding on it, the scrub nurse whispered, her voice muffled behind the mask. I wanted to snap at her, to shut her down before panic spread, but she was right. Every drug, every shock, every desperate intervention, it wasn't resuscitation. It was nourishment. The void inside him swelled with every attempt we made to bring him back. The anesthesiologist's gloves were slick with sweat. Mike, he said, his voice ragged, using my first name like a plea. He's gone. Whatever this is we need to call it. But I couldn't. Surgeons don't quit. I leaned over the cavity, my gloved fingers trembling as I reached for something solid. Anything I could name, repair, control. My hand brushed against the darkness, and in that second, my world collapsed. I didn't feel tissue. I didn't feel bone. I felt myself. My own pulse echoed back through my fingertips, thudding not in my chest, but inside his. The monitors shifted, no longer showing his vitals, but mine, my heart rate, my blood pressure, my oxygen saturation. All of it, stolen, mirrored on the screen. The scrub nurse gasped. It's using him as a vessel. Doctor, it's inside you. Before I could answer, his eyes snapped open. Not grey now, pale, lidless, empty. His lips parted around the endotracheal tube, and in my voice, flat and mocking, he spoke. Scalpel, retractors, suction. The words I'd repeated my entire career, but hearing them from his mouth shattered me. My knees nearly gave way. My resident dropped the retractor with a clang that echoed like a gunshot in the sterile room. The anesthesiologist swore under his breath and ripped off his gloves. This isn't medicine anymore. This is something else. He bolted for the crash cart, fumbling for another syringe. But before he could push it, the instruments on the tray rattled violently. One scalpel shot across the room, embedding itself into the wall with a metallic thunk. The suction tube writhed like a serpent, coiling around the nurse's arm until she screamed. The monitors pulsed with impossible symbols, glowing green against the screen, not numbers, not waveforms, language, a language none of us could read. And through it all, the whisper rose again. Not faint this time, not uncertain, a voice vibrating against the walls of the operating room. You shouldn't be here. It felt like the room exhaled when that voice settled over us. A low-pressure system rolling across tile and steel. I've heard hundreds of last breaths, but this was different. This was the operating room itself, taking one. My resident Alvarez, sharp when fear didn't choke him, was frozen with the retractor hanging loose in his hand. The scrub nurse, Lena, bit down on a tremor hard enough that I could see it jump in her throat. Our anesthesiologist, Pritchard, the calmest man I know under a crisis, made the smallest mistake I'd ever seen him make. He said my name like a prayer, Mike. I needed a plan. Protocol is a surgeon's religion. When the human map fails, you fall back on process. But process demanded a map. And the map had slipped off the table and vanished into that shifting hollow where a heart should be. The monitors no longer offered numbers. Instead, symbols unfurled across the glass like a green procession. Strokes, hooks, a syntax that looked almost like an ECG had learned to write. Every few seconds, the glyphs snapped into a wave, and that wave landed hard inside my chest, like someone thumped the back of my sternum with a fist. Not the patient's rhythm, mine. Turn off the mains, I said. My voice sounded like it had come from the wrong end of a hallway. Kill power to the rack. Everything. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't medicine. But it was what you do when a device hijacks your patient. Pull the plug. Pritchard vaulted to the panel like a sprinter at the blocks. When he threw the breaker, the overhead booms dimmed to the auxiliary glow and the vents slowed to a low animal sigh. For an instant, the glyphs on the monitor stuttered then. They kept writing without power. The cord hung limp. The machine was a dead thing. The screen wasn't, Lena whispered. It doesn't need our electricity. I told myself I didn't hear the next line, but I did. All of us did. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. No, the voice said, a gentleness that felt like a hand closing over a mouth. I have yours. Pritchard's jaw locked, and his eyes slid to the carotid monitor, a little inline transducer that had no reason to be alive. A wave pulsed across its blank face and landed again in my chest. Adrenaline washed me clean and cold. I was the conduit. Somehow I was the thing it had grabbed through. Mike Pritchard said carefully, step away from the field. I took one step back. The pull tightened like wire. Another, he said, barely breathing the word. I took it, and the wire bit deeper. The hollow inside the patient rippled, and two lidless pale ovals tracked me like fish sliding under ice. Every part of me that knew anatomy said lungs don't look, but every part of me that knew people recognized attention. It was watching me, and it wanted me close. Alvarez found his voice. Doctor, we could close. We could pack and close. He was 27, bright, still believing that if you close the body, you close the problem. The worst thing in the world is watching belief fracture in a good student. You can't close a hole into nowhere, Pritchard said, though I could hear the plea tucked into his logic. We need to reduce exposure. We need to reduce you. I thought of the wife, the one who'd found him. We had her name on the chart. Mara. I could almost hear how she must have sounded on the phone. He was fine. He was reading. Then he was on the floor. No medical history. No arrhythmia. No medications. No reason. She'd wait in a family room that smelled like burnt coffee and vinyl, and a social worker would sit beside her with a posture practiced in bad news. If we walked out and told her we'd decut her husband open and found an emptiness that could write, who would she complain to? What department? What board? Lidocaine, I said, surprising myself. If it's hijacking a conducting pathway, we interrupt conduction. It's not a heart, Alvarez said, and I heard the prayer in his protest. Neither is a defibrillator a heart, I told him. And it still talks to one. Lena drew the syringe without me asking. She knew my hands, my voice, my bad gambles. She'd been with me through ruptured aneurysms and night shift miracles where bodies came back because we bullied physics into remembering us. She pushed the lidocaine into the line with a control that would have passed a needle through a silk thread. The symbols stumbled. For one breath, the screen almost remembered numbers. 72 appeared, and then the glyph swallowed it. The wave that landed in my chest missed a beat. The absence of it felt like stepping off a curb in the dark. I staggered and caught the Mayo stand with my hip. The voice did not whisper this time, it spoke. Don't touch what you can't name. Lena flinched hard enough to scrape her glove on the retractor. It hears us, she said, and I wanted to tell her not to be superstitious. I wanted to tell her that sound is physics, and fear is chemistry, and we are professionals. But the words stacked up dumb behind my teeth because the awe felt smaller, as if the walls had learned to lean. Pritchard's eyes tracked mine, and he nodded once. The silent veteran's signal. I follow you even when I don't agree. What else? He asked. Cold, I said. Drop the room. If it behaves like conduction, we slow it. That'll wreck your hands, Lena said, which was her way of saying, you'll pay for this later. We'll all pay for this later, I said. Pritchard dialed the thermostat. The vents woke and breathed winter. In under a minute, the room's humidity shifted, and the steel trays fogged and cleared like they were remembering breath. My skin beneath the gown prickled. The hollow in the patient trembled, and if I can say this without betraying the part of me that worships facts, the air smelled different. Copper, shore blood, always writes its scent. But under it a mineral cold, basement stone after flood. The glyphs slowed. That was true. They crawled now like old film. My pulse inside my chest hesitated at the same tempo. For a strange perfect second, I believed we might bully this too. I said, suction, and Lena placed the tip without looking away from the void. A fidelity so complete, it hurt to witness. When the suction touched, the hollow pushed back. Not a metaphor. The tip deflected as though a current hit it from beneath. The line buzzed in my palm and heat ran up the metal like a fuse. I dropped it and it clattered across the tile. Alvarez yelped and grabbed the retractor handles tighter. Stop touching it, Pritchard barked. Every contact is he didn't finish. The glyphs surged, and 3 symbols repeated at the center of the screen. Bathing the glass in green, 3 strokes, hooked right, stacked. They stamped like a heartbeat. With each stamp a hum shivered in the overhead arms, and a hair-thin rattle ran through the light housings. Is that a word? Alvarez whispered. Lena shook her head. It's a warning, the room answered her. A sound rose not from speakers but from steel like bowed metal, like a tuned rail a mile away, the song of mass. The OR door at our backs clicked once. We all turned because our bodies remembered being prey before our brains learned to call it vigilance. Alvarez tried the handle, because that's what you do to prove you're not afraid. It didn't move. He shoved harder. The crash bar didn't give. His breath skittered. Leave it, I said, because I couldn't afford his panic in my periphery. We are not trapped. I said it like leaders say things we need to be true. The voice god, I hate calling it that. It makes me complicit in its shape rolled under the table and up through our bones. You came in, it said, patient, as a parent. You stay. Alvarez spun. Eyes slick, the retractor tugging the patient open in an angle that felt indecent, like exposure turned to insult. Doctor, his voice hitched. He was too young to hide it. What is it? I answered, in the only language I had left that felt like mine. A case. I forced a breath. We work the case. I chose something simple, a clamp. A clamp fixes, bleeds, tames rivers that rise. I slid it toward the edge of the hollow the way you approach an animal that could bolt slow with my intent packed tight. The instant cold metal crossed the line. The auxiliary lights popped in a chain like someone walking a hallway of light switches with malice in their wrists. The room dropped into a twilight lit only by the lumen inside the patient. The glow from the cavity was no color I could fetch a name for. It felt like gray remembered fire. Alvarez swore. Lena made a small sound no one has ever taught a professional to make. Pritchard's voice cracked for the first time in 15 years. Mike, step away. I wanted to. God, I wanted to walk out of that circle of glow and scrub the idea of it off my skin until I bled. But the pull tightened when I even thought it. I felt a cord thread from that hollow to my chest, a suture tied wrong between two buttons. And then something older than fear, older than steel and gowns and rules, scrolled under my hands. A memory of the first cadaver in anatomy lab, how we stood in a tiled room and called reverence by another name, how we learned that bodies are houses, how we learned that houses can be opened. Talk to me, I said, and I realized too late I wasn't speaking to my team. The pale ovals in the hollow blinked, the lids that weren't lids swept down and up. The not voice moved like weather. You did not ask to enter, it said, and the floor transmitted the words like a stethoscope held to the hospital's chest. I swallowed, and the swallow hurt. We ask now. A pause. The shape of a held breath stretched into mathematics. Then, do surgeons ask? Good ones do, I said, because the only thing I had left was the ground of my oath. We ask the body, we listen, we close what we open. The glow trembled. The glyphs on the screen pulled into a single line, and for a heartbeat, my non-ori sinus rhythm drew itself gentle and perfect across the glass. The room remembered being a room. The vents breathed. Lena's shoulders dropped a fraction. Hope is a treacherous medicine, but I gave us each 10 seconds of it. Then the line vaulted into a spike so tall it left the graph. The screen didn't catch it, the light caught it. A blade of brightness cut through the dim, and every instrument on the back table wrenched as if a magnet yanked them from a long way off. A clamp lifted and hung in the air, point down, shivering like a compass needle torn between north and something that hated north. The voice rolled through the steel again, quiet as prayer. You open, it said. You stay. The clamp dropped point first into the tile and sang. Alvarez shouted and stumbled back. The retractor handle slipped and the opening widened, not because of him, not because of any device, but because the edges pulled themselves apart with a wet patience. The glow swelled. Air turned to cold water in my lungs. The pull on my chest cinched until each breath felt borrowed on a debt I couldn't pay back. Dr. Lena said, and there was something in the way she said it that I will take to my grave, love or loyalty or the shape of both braided. If it wants you, we move you. She stepped into the sterile field like she had all the right in the world. Like scrubs are armor and courage is a credential. She took my wrist. Her glove was cold where the alcohol had left. Her eyes were steady in a face that finally remembered to be afraid. It was the smallest human contact, and the pull eased by a margin. Enough for me to breathe without biting. I realized, with the clarity of a scalpel-finding vessel, that it had made a mistake. It had chosen me. That meant it had chosen a node, not a room. It meant there might be a way to give it something else to hold. Alvarez, I said, and when he looked up I saw the kid I'd watched tie his first knot. The kid who laughed too loud after night shift because sleep felt dangerous. I need your phone. He blinked at me like I'd asked for a storm. My what now? I said. He fumbled it out with hands that belonged on a different day and tossed it. I caught it left-handed and woke it with a ghost of my thumb through the glove. The wallpaper was a dog with poor judgment and a better grin. For a second it stunned me with its ordinary. I opened the recorder. I set it on the drape edge, inches from the glow. If the glyphs were a language, if the voice was pressure that could be caught, then sound could be data, and data could be a map, and a map is how you get home. Talk, I said to the hollow, say what you want. The voice answered without anger. It didn't need anger. Permission, it said. Something in me, some stupid, stubborn human part flinched toward yes. The part that holds doors and yields lane and believes that asking is holy. I closed my eyes. I pictured Mara in the family room. I pictured the way she would hold her hands when I told her whatever lie I decided was kindest. I opened my eyes. For what? I asked. To make a room, it said. Out of him, I asked. It paused, and in that pause I heard it learn. Out of you, it said. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because the moment it said those words, out of you, the pull on my chest became unbearable. Not pain, not pressure, but something deeper, like a hand had slipped inside my ribs and was shaping me from the inside out. I staggered back, my vision blurring, the suction hiss still echoing though no one was touching it. Dr. Lena grabbed me by the shoulders, her eyes locked on mine, desperate but steady. Fight it. Do you hear me? Don't give it permission. Pritchard was already at the crash cart, yanking drawers open, his face slick with sweat. We sedate him, drop him, break the link. It's the only shot. No, I barked, though my own voice sounded strange to me, hollow, split, like there was another voice speaking in unison. If you knock me out, you won't control what it does next. The thing inside the patient shifted, the glow rising, pulsing like a second heartbeat. The pale ovals blinked again. My resident whimpered, his gloves smeared red from clutching the retractor handles too long. His voice cracked like a child's doctor. It's making space. It's opening. He wasn't wrong. The cavity was widening on its own. No sternum to stop it, no ribs to resist. Just that impossible hollow stretching further and further, pulling at the table straps until they snapped like rotted twine. The patient's torso arched upward, as though gravity no longer applied to him. Then the lights went. Every single one, not flickering, not dimmed on. We were swallowed in total black except for the glow from inside his chest. That glow cast long shadows across the tile, and for the first time I realized those shadows weren't ours. They were taller, wrong shapes, moving when we didn't. Mike Pritchard whispered into the dark. We're not in control here. We never were. The voice came again, louder now, reverberating through the walls and floor until even the crash cart rattled against the tiles. You cut. You stay. You are mine. The suction tube lashed off the floor like a striking snake. Lena screamed as it whipped across her arm, leaving a welt that bled instantly. Instruments skittered off the back table, clanging against the walls as though yanked by invisible wires. The monitors that should have been dead flared back to life. Every screen filled with the same repeating word and symbols none of us could read. And then the body sat up, slow, mechanical, like a marionette tugged upright. The retractors tore loose, clattering to the ground, as the cavity opened wider, spilling light into the black room. His head turned toward me, not toward Pritchard, not toward Alvarez, not even Lena, me, always me. The eyes in his face were shut, but the eyes inside his chest stared straight into mine. Lena grabbed my wrist, her nails biting through the glove. It wants you. It's not going to stop. I knew she was right. My own heartbeat was no longer my own. It was sinking, pulsing in perfect rhythm with the light inside that hollow. Each thud made my vision flicker. I couldn't tell if I was standing in the OR or inside that cavity. Pritchard's voice cracked. We end this. Now. He lifted the defibrillator paddles, charging them, the rising whine cutting through the chaos. If it's living through him, we burn it out. No, I shouted, but it was too late. He pressed them to the body's chest. Clear. The jolt ripped through the room, the body convulsed, the cavity exploding in a burst of white light that blinded us all. For a heartbeat, the voice fell silent. For a heartbeat, I thought it had worked. Then the monitors screamed. Not with numbers, not with symbols, but with my name, over and over, written in glowing green letters. Harris, Harris, Harris. Lena sobbed. It knows you. The body turned its head slowly, impossibly slowly, until it faced me. Its lips parted, and in my own voice, flat and cold, it spoke. Permission granted. The words hit me harder than any blade ever could. Permission granted. It wasn't a sound carried through the air. It was inside me, vibrating against bone, flooding my skull until I thought my head would split open. My knees buckled, and I clutched the side of the table just to stay upright. The body, if I can still call it that, rose higher. Its restraint snapped loose, falling uselessly onto the tile. The glow in its chest expanded, reaching, stretching, until it painted the walls in a pale, pulsing light. The shadows around us stretched like arms, clawing their way across steel cabinets, across the ceiling. The smell of ozone and copper filled the room, so thick it made my throat burn. "Mike, look at me." Lena's voice cut through the roar. Her hands gripped both sides of my face, forcing my eyes to hers. "Don't give it anything else. Do you understand? It only has what you let it take." Her courage was the only thing keeping me from collapsing into that void. But even as she said it, I felt my own pulse slip further, sensing to the glow, my chest tightening like it wanted to crack open. My vision doubled, half in the OR, half in the things world. A space with no walls, no floor, only shifting darkness and those pale eyes blinking endlessly. Behind us, Alvarez screamed. "The door, it's gone. It's just war now." His fists pounded against tile, each strike more frantic than the last. "We're trapped. We're trapped." Pritchard still held the paddles, his arms trembling. His face was pale, lips cracked from fear. "We fry it again," he muttered. "We keep hitting it until it stops." His voice was wild, desperate. But before I could stop him, the entity moved. The glow surged, and the paddles ripped out of Pritchard's hands as if yanked by invisible ropes. They whipped back at him, slamming into his chest. A blinding crack filled the air, his body convulsed, smoke curling from his gown. Then he collapsed, twitching once before going still. Lena gasped, choking back a sob. Alvarez stumbled away from the wall, shaking his head violently. "We're all going to die here, don't you see? It wants us all." "No," the voice said. This time not a whisper, not a roar, but a chorus layered voices that filled every corner of the room. "Not all. One stays, one becomes mine, one leaves to tell." The body on the table turned its head toward me. The pale eyes in its chest pulsed brighter, like a heartbeat made of light and shadow. My name echoed again on the monitors. "Harris, Harris." Alvarez fell to his knees, sobbing. "Not me. Please, not me. I can't." He pointed at me, his finger trembling. "It wants you. Give it you. Just give it what it wants." Lena shoved him aside, her mask damp with tears. "No, if it takes him, it wins. Don't you get it? That's why it chose him." She turned to me, her voice raw but steady. "Doctor, listen to me. If it demands one, let it take me." Her words carved into me deeper than any scalpel. She was ready to sacrifice herself so I wouldn't have to. Ready to give herself to whatever nightmare had crawled into our world. "No," I rasped, my throat raw, every muscle trembling. "You've stood beside me in every fight. Not this one, not like this." The glow pulsed again, brighter, wider. The voice thundered. "Choose. Now." The air grew colder. The cabinets shook violently. Instruments rattled across the floor. The walls groaned as though the hospital itself was about to collapse inward. Lena grabbed my wrist, her eyes never leaving mine. "If you hesitate, it'll take all of us. Choose me. End this." Alvarez screamed. "No. Him. It wants him." His voice cracked into madness. "Give it him." And in that instant, I broke. My chest heaved, my vision tunneled. I thought of Mara in the waiting room, of every patient I'd ever sworn to save, of the oath I had carried my entire life. And then I spoke, my voice hollow. "Take him." Alvarez's eyes widened. His scream tore through the OR as the shadows surged forward, wrapping around him like chains. He clawed at the floor, leaving bloody streaks across the tile, his voice shrieking my name, begging, pleading. "No, please. Don't let it." His words were cut off as the shadows dragged him into the glowing cavity, his body folding, vanishing as though he had never existed. The glow pulsed once, then receded. The cavity closed. The monitors fell silent. The room was still again. Lena collapsed against the wall, sobbing quietly into her gloves. Pritchard's body lay slumped by the crash cart, smoke still curling from his chest. The patient, what was left of him, lay motionless, his face gray, his chest hollow but still. And then, with a sound like a door unlocking, the crash bar clicked. The OR door creaked open, spilling dim hallway light into the room. Lena looked at me with hollow eyes. It kept its word, she whispered, but I knew better. I staggered toward the door, my legs barely holding me. My chest still pulsed faintly, not with my rhythm, but with something else, something I had carried out with me. We stepped into the hall, the normal hum of the hospital washing over us like nothing had ever happened. But I knew the truth. Alvarez wasn't gone, not really. The thing had taken him, but it had taken me, too. Because even now, years later, when I stand in front of a mirror, I sometimes see it pale, lidless eyes blinking back at me from inside my own chest, and I know one thing with absolute certainty: I never left that operating room. Thank you all for joining me on these journeys. Your support means everything, and I love reading your reactions and personal experiences in the comments. If these stories kept you on the edge of your seat or gave you chills, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more haunting stories. Have you ever experienced something similar, or perhaps you have your own unexplainable story to share? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Each of your stories adds another layer to our growing community of horror enthusiasts, and if you think someone else might enjoy a good scare, don't forget to share this video with them. Stay tuned for more spine-chilling stories. And remember, sometimes the scariest tales are the ones that could happen to any of us. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, if you dare.